Starfield gameplay performance is once again in the headlines as it appears on PC there may not be support for DLSS as Starfield is officially partnering with AMD. I do have an article we're going to look at in just a moment, but I do want to stress that at this point in time, I've continued to say that a lot of the concerns about Starfield's performance on console, many people have tried to isolate that to console, assuming or presuming that you'll get 60 FPS performance on your PC and that the game's going to run better or offer more options on PC. We currently don't know that, and this seemingly, confirmation that there's going to be a lack of DLSS support is not really looking good for those who are hoping for that higher level performance on their gaming rig. DLSS is essentially something that turns itself on and learns and adapts and optimizes performance in the game. That's just sort of a layman's summary. I'm not a tech guru. I'm not going to get into how it works against what AMD offers with FSR. FSR is improving and getting better from what I've read and what I've heard, but DLSS is preferred on NVIDIA, and that offers you a lot of opportunities to just get a little bit more out of your current rig. And if you look at the specifications required for Starfield on PC, one of the main concerns is that the recommended spec system is not that much stronger than an Xbox Series X. And if you look at the recommended spec system, it's actually harnessing power that's not as common if you look at Steam charts. Most people currently, the majority of PC users, according to the charts that track people's hardware, indicates that a lot of the people, the majority of the owners of PCs out there, have PCs that are weaker than the recommended specs for Starfield. And that seems to indicate, at least from where I sit, just armchair, layman, non-tech guy, that a lot of people will not be getting 60 FPS in Starfield, even on their PC. Now, some of those, consumers may be accustomed to more middle-of-the-road performance on their computer. Maybe they're just used to it. They don't really have a high-end rig. This would be a reason, I think, to maybe consider upgrading. But for now, we haven't gotten a lot of information from Bethesda about what Starfield's going to need to get good performance on a PC. The focus was really around Series X and Series S in the interviews where Todd Howard confirmed that the game would be capped at 30 FPS. And now PC users are staring down the barrel of something that is frustrating to Xbox users as well, and that's a lack of options. That's something that I really was stressing, that we just want the option to turn on performance mode. And one of the questions I had for Todd Howard was, if you're going to protect fidelity that much on the Series X, that I can't go in and turn things off, at least not down to the point that maybe I get 40 or 50 frames per second, just something more than 30. The question would be, are you going to let people on PC turn things off? Are you going to let them turn down texture, volumetric fog, draw distance? These are things commonly turned down to squeeze out more performance of a weaker system, and those who like to harness the power of DLSS, that's one more avenue to get the game to run better. So let's take a look at this article from PC Gamer. Starfield partners with AMD, and oh boy, the internet is not happy. Some folks are mourning the perceived lack of DLSS support, some expecting more classic Bethesda launch jank, some fear Jedi Survivor level issues, and some just straight out call for a boycott of MD. I am so glad that this is being referenced and mentioned. As a huge fan of Jedi Fallen Order, I am infuriated at the state of that game. It is terrible on console still. People that said they had no issues, I'm assuming they ran at quality and just couldn't see it. I've spoken to people who played it on Series X, PlayStation 5, and even on PC. That game has baked in problems. It runs terribly after 6 patches, still not running well. Very disappointed in the way that game has been treated. So I'm happy to see people referencing how bad it is, because it's deserved. AMD has today announced a partnership with Bethesda and Starfield, arguably the most anticipated game of both 2022 and now 2023. And in all honesty, it's not great timing for the Red Team, considering it's been taking a lot of heat recently for its perceived blocking of rival upscalers from its sponsored titles. So they're referencing AMD there. And therefore, today's announcement begs the question as to whether this means there's no hope for DLSS being applied to Starfield outside of enterprising modders once the game releases. And this is something that gets thrown out a lot, that modders will fix the game in the wake of its launch. You have to remember, It can be difficult for modders to do a lot of good work in the early days because any updates, any patches, anything Bethesda pushes out in the early days of the game will undo their work. And so you can be fighting a little bit of an uphill battle. So there's no guarantee that modders are going to be doing a bunch of that optimization and work in the early days because you run the risk of bucking up against the patches and the updates that Bethesda themselves will be pushing out. The nixing of rival implementations is an accusation AMD hasn't actually denied, but has skirted the question when asked whether blocking the likes of DLSS and XESS are functions of AMD sponsorship. For its part, NVIDIA explicitly stated that it, quote, does not and will not block, restrict, discourage, or hinder developers from implementing competitor technologies in any way. Yeah, NVIDIA doesn't need to do that because theirs is better. Like right now, they probably don't care. Go ahead. DLSS is better than FSR, would likely be their attitude. The reaction to the announcement of the AMD Starfield partnership has not been particularly positive, even on the AMD subreddit, often a bastion of support for everything the Red Team does. A lot of folk are invoking Jedi Survivor as exemplary of how bad things might be for the Starfield launch. So yeah, things are actually actively hostile out there. If you're not familiar with the Jedi Survivor launch, familiarize yourself with it, just by doing a couple Google searches or YouTube watches. I refuse to play the game. That's how bad it is. There's entire game hitches and stutters. It's not just frame drops. It's screen tearing. I went to jump from one location to the next, and the whole game, it's like it freezes for half a second. It is truly terrible. Funny enough, that a Jedi Survivor developer was talking about how developers don't want to release games that aren't good, or they would never do a thing like that. And it's like, did you look at your game before you released it? It's actually more measured over on NVIDIA, the subreddit, where there's just seems to be an air of resignation to the fact that it's going to have to rely on modders to squeeze some extra performance out of the game. That continued trust in modders, I get it, but that's just not at all excusable. I really think that narrative is going to fall flat with so many people. I don't think the lion's share of gamers care about that anymore. They don't think it's charming for a game to come out half-baked. Oh, then your modders will fix it. And some of this is on recent releases. You can't ignore the fact that a bunch of multi-plat games keep coming out and they run markedly worse on PC. So PC users, in my mind, are going to get a bit jaded. They're going to get a little tired of this. They're not just going to say, oh no, it's fine. This is like the 7th game in a row that runs like dog water over here, but the modders will fix it. I think that tolerance is likely getting very low. That fuse is getting very, very low. Now, I know Bethesda games are in a unique category, but I still think the general consensus will not be one of praise or patience. On Twitter, well, that's the hot mess of toxicity you might expect. Except from one obviously partisan account anyways. AMD GPU says, NVIDIA sycophants crying about AMD exclusives is hilarious. NVIDIA has plagued the industry for years with exclusivity and anti-competitive tactics. Man, I'm so accustomed to reading, words like that now. It's remarkable how much this is happening. Todd Howard has confirmed that we have AMD engineers in our code working on FSR2 image processing and upscaling, and it looks incredible. Fidelity FX Super Resolution 2.0, or FSR2, is a far more impressive bit of upscaling tech compared with the first generation, and for Radeon gamers, you're going to be more than happy. Here's the thing. This is actually relevant to the recent conversation about Final Fantasy XVI because it's actually using FSR1, which was likely what was available during its development cycle. Many people hoping there's a way to upgrade to FSR2 to significantly help with the upscaling, so that way they could just run dynamic resolution all the time. Currently, Final Fantasy XVI is a bit of a mess in the performance mode. It's fine in combat, but you come out of combat and it's really, really rough, and it would be nice to have that turned on all the time. Maybe they'd be more confident if they can somehow upgrade. I don't know how that works. That's just what I know some people are hoping to see. If you're rocking an AMD GPU, the preference for FSR2 over rival upscalers is of absolutely no concern to you because NVIDIA's proprietary upscaling methodology means that your AMD graphics card can't take advantage of DLSS anyway. While if you've got a GeForce GPU, you can still enable FSR2 for a frame rate boost. So for those of us that are on the GeForce side, I've never gotten into this. This is crazy, you know, that I've kind of gotten pulled into the console war unwillingly with some of my commentary and my thoughts on the Activision deal, and now I'm seeing there's tribalism over video cards and anti-competitive deals and you know, proprietary deals and exclusivity. It's everywhere, apparently. I've never really cared about any of this. I always just bought what I thought was good. You know, I'm not a tech guy. I would typically have somebody build my rig for me. And yeah, I have a GeForce GPU, so it sounds like I can turn this on for a bit of a frame rate boost. Not sure what else I'll get, but the fact that I can do that in Starfield is a little encouraging, because that's mainly what I was going to be playing Starfield on PC for. I actually haven't upgraded my rig, and I was planning on doing it for Starfield because I don't want to play it at 30 FPS on my Xbox Series X, which is now a Game Pass access paperweight. But, you know, I want to play Starfield at the highest frames per second, so maybe I'll be able to. I don't know. Having AMD's open tech in the game means that from launch, everyone has access to a functioning upscaler and not just a subset of gamers. So I could see somebody saying that this is preferable. I am not super educated on like FSR2 versus DLSS, but the fact that they're saying, oh no, you'll have access to it, it won't be proprietary, I could see why people would necessarily cheer for that. PC gamers are way more about the openness of the landscape, maybe a little bit too open, because they're also, you know, typically encouraging people to, oh, it's the only way you can own your stuff is to pirate it, which, you know, that's a little bit more open than I think many people are comfortable with. So I could see that being something that PC users, you know, want to see. But again, if you're an NVIDIA holder, you're probably not too happy about hearing you won't be able to use DLSS. The argument is, however, that the actual dev side implementation of DLSS and FSR2 are so similar that it is often stated as a minor thing to be able to add both upscalers side by side. And indeed, many games do this, even the poster boy for NVIDIA GPU Tech Cyberpunk 2077. NVIDIA has even created a tool that will allow developers to add XESS, DLSS, and FSR2 without much logistical burden at all. I never want to armchair dev and say something's easy that might not be, but it sounds like there's solutions here. So it would really make you wonder, what was the decision for the partnership, if that partnership subsequently means that DLSS is kind of left out in the cold. The other argument is, for NVIDIA GPU users at least, that AMD's FSR2 is less effective than the latest version of NVIDIA's deep learning super sampling tech. That deep learning is the key component in maximizing performance and optimization on your system. That's why people like it so much. It's actually very effective technology. I remember turning it on in Outriders and just couldn't believe the difference that it made. In fairness to AMD, this isn't just about the PC, and the fact that the hardware is what powers the Xbox Series X and S is important to remember here. It's something Jack Hyun, AMD's general manager of its computing and graphics group, says in the announcement video. These optimizations both accelerate performance and enhance the quality of your gameplay using highly multi-threaded code that both Xbox and PC players will get to take advantage of. Well, I would love for this to benefit my Series X and give me 60 FPS, since I think that's a base level expectation of the Series X, since we were told that would be the standard output, but apparently that's not the case. But that hasn't stopped people complaining about what it might mean for Starfield in general. There is both a lot of fear about Starfield having a Cyberpunk 2077 launch and a sort of jaded pleasure in the potential for one of the biggest games of the year releasing in an absolute state. And given Bethesda's history of a certain level of jank, endearing or otherwise, in its games, there are a lot of folk expecting Starfield's launch to be a bug-ridden mess, most especially on PC. According to Matt Booty, this would be the least buggy game released by Bethesda if it was released right now. So they're still squashing bugs, but they do have the bug count down to where he can say that. Now, that could be a bit of a cherry-pick stat. If you're going pure quantity and saying, well, it has the least amount of bugs, it still could be a pretty high number. I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying that could be the case. It's also feared that given AMD's involvement in the development process, there's unlikely to be a particularly special-looking PC edition. Radeon cards aren't really at the top table of ray tracing effects, and it seems likely that any implementation will be limited at best, as most ray tracing features are on console. That's actually really interesting that potentially AMD helped with this, and if it hindered some of the next gen fidelity, then what exactly are we sacrificing frames for? The fact that I can store the sandwiches, like, is that really the reason? Because it doesn't sound like they pushed ray tracing, doesn't sound like they pushed the graphics. I want more information. I'm curious at this point what exactly is going on here. All AMD has to do to kill this mild controversy dead is to come out and officially state that it is not blocking any developers from implementing whatever competitor features it sees fit in partnered games, whether that's DLSS or Intel's XESS. We've reached out to AMD for comment and will update if they choose to respond with anything concrete. We've also reached out to NVIDIA for comment too, and if you scroll down, no update. So this is obviously ongoing. We'll revisit this if we feel we need to. I think the development of Starfield and the performance of the game on Series X, Series S, and PC will be an ongoing discussion, especially once the game is in the wild. Curious what you think about this choice. What does this look like for PC performance and the options you're going to receive when you play the game on a PC? As always, if you like this video, be sure to check out my live streams. Usually my uploads go over into a members-only debrief, so consider joining if you want to take part in that. As always, hit like, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.